Hi there. We're going to continue our thinking about free verse poetry. And yesterday you brainstormed on three different topics and you just free wrote like a paragraph. And then today we're going to do is we're going to go over techniques that poets use in poetry. And then you're going to try out some of these techniques on the paragraphs that you wrote yesterday. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is you're going to have a notes in front of you, a piece of paper, and I'm going to go over the techniques, and then you can pause the video and then make sure you complete the notes on the left-hand side. I've left the technique blank on your note sheet, so all you have to do is write in the vocabulary term. You can do it as I go, or you could stop and pause the video after I'm all finished and you can fill them in. So the first one is lines of irregular length. And what that means is that you play around with how long lines are. So you can use short lines to speed the poem up, use long lines to slow down the poem, or even use one word that you really want to stand out. So you could just use one word, that's the whole line. The second one is line breaks. So you can break a line to emphasize a word or thought. It might surprise the reader how you broke a line. You could break a line into many pieces. Just decide maybe where you want line breaks to be so that you can emphasize the mood or the thought that you're trying to get across. You can use a line stop. So there is no rules in punctuation for poetry, but you can use end punctuation. So you can try commas or periods or semicolons or colons. It just really is what allows the reader to take a breath. So commas, they take a shorter breath. Periods, they take a longer breath. Colons, you might list things. So play around with how to use punctuation. One of my favorite techniques is called enjambment, and it's when you continue a phrase or a sentence from one line of poetry to the next. So the line ends, but the thought continues on to the next line. It's just a really cool way to keep the poem flowing and just a unique way to play around with words. Poets use repetition, so they can repeat a word, they can repeat a line or a phrase, they can repeat a stanza throughout the poem. So you can use repetition any way you want. Free poetry can also rhyme. You can rhyme occasionally for impact. You could also decide on a rhyme pattern and you want the whole poem to rhyme. That's fine too. Alliteration is a way to play around with sounds. Remember, beginning sounds that all sound the same. And then the really cool thing you can do with poems is you can format it any way you want. So you can be creative with how you space. You can bold words. You can use italics. You can make different fonts, bigger, smaller. You can move everything to the left, to the right. You can write in stanzas, which are paragraphs in a poem. You can spread words out to make them like appear bigger, even though they're just one word. So you can format a poem any way you want. Okay, so go ahead and push pause and finish filling out your notes. And then we're going to take a look at some poems next. So pause if you need to. Okay, we're going to take a look at this poem by Amanda Gorman, and we're going to try and figure out what poetic techniques she uses in this poem. It says to discuss at your table, but I want you to just think about it and I'll chat with you about it. The poem says, we have learned that justice isn't always justice. We have our eyes on the future while history has its eyes on us. There is always light if we are brave enough to see it. There is always light if we are brave enough to be it. So think about, what is Amanda Gorman using here? Well, she is using, for sure, she's using repetition. So she actually repeats a line specifically, and then she repeats a phrase or part of a sentence. And I think that that's what she's really using to sort of create impact there at the end of her poem. She's using repetition. My all-time favorite, Jason Reynolds. Your dream is the mole behind your ear, that chip in your front tooth, your freckles. It's a thing that makes you special, but not the thing that makes you great. The courage in trying, the passion in living, and the acknowledgement and appreciation of the beauty happening around you does that. So I don't know if you picked up on what Jason Reynolds does so brilliantly in this poem, but he's using enjambment. So his thoughts continue on to the next line. So even though a line ends, the thought continues on to the next line. And he's also playing around with punctuation. You see commas and periods throughout the stanzas. And so you can decide how you kind of want to use end punctuation in your poetry. And then the last one we're going to look at is Today I Am by Janet Wong. Today I am someone who ate ice cream for breakfast, someone who dresses like a panda, black and white, someone who hates the smell of banana peels in the class trash, someone who carries way too much in my backpack, someone who carries way too much in my head. So Janet uses, she plays around with line length. So she uses a 1-word line, she uses a 2-word line, and then she uses repetition, and she's repeating the beginning 2 words for 5 different lines in her poem. So she played around with repetition and length of lines. So thinking about those techniques, what I want you to do for the rest of class is you're going to go back to your poetry brainstorm that you did yesterday in that Google Doc. And you're going to look at one of your paragraphs and you're going to try and incorporate some of these techniques to create a free verse poem out of your paragraph. So what does that look like? So here's something that I did. So I first on the left-hand side wrote a paragraph about the beach in the winter. So I just wrote my thoughts. So you can read what I wrote. The beach in the winter is quiet, no sounds of kids playing, no one surfing or sitting in beach chairs enjoying the sun rays. However, there's tranquility. There's a calm and peace that comes from the quiet. The waves crash and crash, and then they recede. They're almost like a rhythmic timer. Waves crash and recede, breathe in and then breathe out. So I took that paragraph and I started playing around with line length, with different words that I could use. I used 1-word lines. I used repetition. So let's see what I wrote. The beach in winter is quiet. No sounds of kids playing. No surfing or sitting in beach chairs soaking up the sun's rays. Instead, tranquility, a calm, a peace that comes from the lack of summer noise. The waves crash and crash, crash. They recede, a rhythmic timer. Breathe in, breathe out. So I used enjambment, I used short lines, I played around with punctuation, I did a little bit of repetition. So you can see how I took a paragraph and I did change some words. I added some alliteration. I took out all the little words a lot and just used the words that I really wanted to make an impact in my poem. So the rest of class period today is what you're going to do is you're just going to refer back to that Google Doc and you're going to use your notes that you've taken today and try to create a free verse poem from one of your paragraphs. And remember, there's no rules in free verse poetry, so you can do anything you want. If you finish one paragraph, try another one. Okay. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you when I get back.